There we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Nerds of Legend. We thank you for joining us after our little brief hiatus over the holidays. We hope everybody had a great Christmas, New Year's, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever the heck it is that you guys celebrate. But we just hope all the celebrations were good and that everybody was, had a little safe end to their holidays there. This week, we're going to get right back into it with another book talk, where we'll be talking about the book Ringworld by Larry Niven, part of a very large series that kind of just like blew up after the first book was written and became a whole sort of universe and spawned all kinds of different. It's sort of a foundational sci-fi series that sort of inspired a lot of current media and other media. So, with that said, let's get right into it with Brendan. How about you give us the recap since it was your pick?
All right. So, as the viewers may remember, we are historically really bad. I'm historically really bad at concise explanations for books. So I'll get brutal to the point. Louis Wu is a 200-year-old exceptionally bored human in the future. As Earth has teleportation devices called transfer boxes, he starts the book trying to go westward continuously to avoid his birthday ending.
Yeah. He decides for his 200th birthday, he's going to just basically throw a party in every time zone.
Yeah, a massive fling. He's the first surviving man to have had first contact with an alien. But outside of that, he doesn't really have a lot of discovery. He doesn't have a lot of inventions or artistic pieces to his name. All he really knows how to do is get fed up with people and kind of go into space on sabbaticals. Mm-hmm. And he's approached. As he's bored with his Earth-wide birthday, he's approached by an alien who tells him to call him Nessus. And he is a Pearson's puppeteer, and these are aliens that have their brain in... they're kind of like horses, but their brain is inside their torso. They have two skulls that have their eyes and mouths, and they use their mouths as hands, and they have 3 legs.
If memory serves, there also have not been seen. They basically disappeared.
Centuries, yeah. So Lewis is 200. He takes drugs to help him prevent aging. Booster spice, but he also, because of space travel and relativity, it also is like, oh hey, I came back after 20 years because I went on a trip. So he's much older than most people he's around.
Yeah.
And he's like, wait a second. I read about you guys when I was 20, 180 years ago, and...
Here's a little artist representation of what a Pearson's puppeteer looks like.
Here you go. And so what ends up happening is Nessus gives him a very interesting proposition. He goes, you know what? I know you're restless. We know all about you and how you're probably getting bored of Earth again. I propose to give you a top secret mission to go to a place I will not tell you yet. If you accept, based on this simple holographic photo I give you, I will give you a ship that is orders of magnitude faster than anything Terrans have. Mm-hmm. And with that, that's all he has. And Lewis goes, you know what? This is all very interesting. I'm in. He then proceeds to meet Speaker to Animals, who is a feline of the Zinti race. Who were initially very warlike, but they happen to keep losing wars to Earth, so they've become sort of not necessarily domesticated, but they've learned to have to use restraint.
Yeah, they're terrifying tiger people with rat tails, huge maws, parasol-like ears, and wicked claws, and also they're 8 feet tall.
And they're 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
The final member of their group is Tila Brown. She is one of several thousand people on Earth that have 6 generations of consecutive progeny that have won Earth-wide lotteries to be able to reproduce. And so Nessus postulates that Tila has genetic predisposition towards luck because of the infinitesimally small percentage that it took for her to exist.
Mhm.
And she's one of several thousand people on Earth that has this crazy good luck, apparently. And
I believe it's implied, it's discussed that basically Earth had an overpopulation problem. So like they had to like do. Initially, it was done by like a committee, like where you were like chosen based off of like your accomplishments and like intelligence and stuff like that and physicality. But then it immediately became corrupt, where like all the officials were basically accepting bribes in order to allow reproduction, and instead, so then they're like, all right, well, let's just make it a lottery system.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening is Tila decides she wants to go along on the trip as long as Lewis is going. She doesn't want to leave him. And she initially expresses love for him. And so with that, she decides to come along.
Mm-hmm.
And they find out as they approach, Nessus basically informs them and takes them to the puppeteer's homeworld, which isn't exactly a world. It's a series of worlds that have been organized in a way that the astrophysics are stable.
Yeah, a series of 5 worlds. They
Yes.
form like a rosette, as they call it, and so it's like basically impossible to happen as a natural phenomenon. But it's all these 5 worlds that are orbiting around each other and formed like a stable orbit.
Right. And
But
so it ends up
which they are teleporting through space at light speed.
Yeah. So it's mentioned several times in the book that the technology level of the Pearson's puppeteers, they're so named. I believe Pearson was the human that first had contact with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's mentioned several times that their technological level, if given to a species with nefarious purposes, would be utterly terrifying. But they are, at the biological level, bred for paranoia and cowardice in order to proliferate and survive.
'Cause they're a race of herbivores.
Yes, all blunt teeth. And so what ends up happening is they reveal as they land on their homeworlds that they want him to go and investigate this Ringworld. The Ringworld is, I don't remember the exact dimensions of it.
Massive.
It's massive. It could dwarf the Earth by to the orders of 10. In fact, if I look it up, it is about,
I believe they said it was 300,000 times the area of the Earth.
yeah, it's 1.6 million kilometers wide. It is the diameter not of Earth, but of Earth's orbit.
Mm-hmm.
So the entire path that the Earth travels around the Sun is the diameter of the Ringworld. It's about 584.3 million miles in circumference.
Mm-hmm.
And the puppeteers postulate that this was created by a race that did not have FTL, or ways to travel to other stars. So in order to solve their population problem, they created a body by which they could fit their population.
And would never have to have any concern for overpopulation ever again.
Right. It's what's really interesting about this book. That's essentially the premise.
How many million miles wide did you say it was?
Good thing I have it open. 584.3
I misheard you. I thought you said 500. I thought you said something different. Sorry.
But yeah,
no, yeah, it's absolutely massive.
What I really appreciate about this book is it's very hard sci-fi. They discuss astral bodies, astrophysics. They discuss electromagnetic radiation. There's all sorts of hard scientific concepts. So much so that in the first edition of this book that was published, Larry did a really, really good job overall of trying to maintain accuracy to science and to the laws of nature. But the first edition of this book, he accidentally wrote that Lewis was traveling eastwards to proliferate his birthday, which would be hastening the end of the day, not westwards. Mm. And like that one mistake and then one caveat about the Ringworld itself were enough that MIT graduates came to science conventions just to like parrot him about this until he finally released an edition with amendments. Mm-hmm. So it certainly falls under hard sci-fi, but I think one of the great strengths of this book, if you compare it to space operas Like, I would consider Foundation to be a space opera. It covers large amounts of time, large amounts of space, multiple characters. Dune does the same. The thing with this book is it centers around four people, four aliens, four sentient beings. Amongst all of the travel they go, the very first chapter, they're flying all over Earth as if it's across your house.
Mm-hmm.
And they're traveling hundreds of light years, which normally would take two years of hypersleep in human travel. I believe they get there in a matter of days.
Yep.
And so what ends up happening is you have this very, I hesitate to say human because two of them are alien, but this very organic, sentient-like connection between these four and this crew as they experience nothing other than galactic adventure.
Yeah, I'd say there's even even though there's you have these two other aliens that are couldn't be more different. Basically, Kzinti are so brave to the point of basically it's their downfall, whereas puppeteers are the same, but like the opposite. They're so cowardly that it's almost to their own detriment. But there's almost this maybe not respect, but sort of begrudging respect that these people all gain for each other eventually. Even though you find out later that Nessus, the puppeteer, has basically been he's the puppeteers are very long lived, so he's the one that basically ran the he caused humanity to have the birthplace lotteries, and they caused
as well as the domestication of the Kzinti.
Yeah, so basically by the humans and Kzinti had so many successive wars over so many generations that and then the Kzinti lost time after time after time, to the point where they basically threw away all of the stupid all of the people that were too brave for their own good. It basically bred the stupidity out of their population, so it ended up with a very brave but still very cautious people.
Not very cautious, just much more.
Very much more cautious.
More they were capable of. In the beginning, when they were talking about this, not in the beginning, but when they finally discussed this, the Kzinti is named Speaker to Animals, which they have to earn their name. They're not given a name; they have to earn their name.
Yeah,
so he was given the name Speaker to Animals because he was an ambassador. Because before the Human Kzinti War, they were not capable of any diplomatic behavior. It's fight or don't fight. That was their two options. And you don't fight if you died fighting.
Yeah, their entire thing was basically they had a huge empire where they would essentially just enslave every race that they came upon, and they were either slaves or food.
Yeah.
Yes, the Zinti historically were approached by a technologically superior race when they were in an Iron Age, that wanted to use them as mercenaries, and they ended up biding their time and overthrowing this race and making them slaves and food. And you can still see that even centuries later. You find out that Speaker to Animals is assigned to the diplomatic mission to the UN in New York, and the people he's with, one of them is doesn't have very good senses, isn't a very good athlete. It's kind of getting up there in age. And the only way for them to save face is to have the dishonorable distinction of being a diplomat. Having to detect when to apologize and when to avoid combat is this dishonorable thing. That's the only thing that they have left to do. Yeah. So there's still some growing for the Zinti.
And they're only the males are sentient.
Yes. So
and the same thing with the puppeteers. Only the males are sentient. The females are not.
Yeah, so the puppeteers, you could consider them as having three genders. Yeah. There's a male that has the ovipositor. There's a male that fertilizes the egg, and then they implant the egg to grow in a female that is not sentient, that just exists for the breeding purpose. So there's sort of you could call them male, and female, but it seems like the human dichotomy. It just there is no direct translation.
Yeah.
The Zinti, meanwhile, have a eugenics biological program with which they subjugate the female gender to be intellectually stymied. So what ends up happening is they test females at birth, and if they're too intelligent, they exterminate them. And they introduce mental inhibitors and all this stuff. I presume to maintain a warlike culture.
Mm-hmm.
They call their language the hero's tongue because they literally interpret themselves as the protagonists of their story. They are the heroes, and everyone else is subject to their actions.
Mm-hmm.
As you might think, they are humbled somewhat by successive losses to the human race.
Mm-hmm.
But still just as cocky.
Just as cocky.
Because as soon as they got on the spaceship, Longshot, which is a gift from the puppeteers, gift is as soon as we complete this mission, you can have this shift. The ship was
He tried to hijack it.
Speaker to Animals was like, right, this is my ship now. Like they're like out in space, past the puppeteer's planet. He's like, kick ass, this is mine.
Well, and then he's like, basically gives him an orgasm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. That's
the puppeteer Westman, the task, which is pure, unadulterated pleasure.
Yeah, it's just like this,
constantly.
This radio transmitter thing that basically just like zaps the pleasure center of your brain, and it's like the most like apparently the greatest experience that you could ever encounter in your life.
Yeah.
Sci-fi orgasmo.
Yeah.
Speaker has a monofilament. Speaker has a monofilament blade that is so sharp and so atomically small that it could slice right through organic matter. And so there's a ball at the end to show you where the sword even is, and it has a retractable blade. And he's threatening the crew with it, and he undergoes such ecstasy that he just goes like, ugh, and it's just like lets the blade drift into the internals of the ship and just carves through a water tank because he's too busy having an orgasm. And
then he goes, "That was amazing. Thank you. Never do that again."
Yeah. What's amazing about his logic is he also goes, if I keep attacking you, you'll keep making me have orgasms, and if you keep doing that, I'll become dependent on you, and that is the most lowly thing I could possibly do in my life.
I want to clarify, though, we are adding the word orgasms.
Yes.
We are using... So those of you who have not read it are not expecting just this like spunk ray that's being wielded by the puppeteer. It specifically says it amplifies the pleasure centers.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, we are
serotonin, oxytocin.
We are adding the word orgasm. So it is not actually that, but it is intense pleasure, and it does make you kind of dependent on the wielder. Now, to fast forward...
No. And Ben's delicate sensibilities are still intact because there was no...
For now.
For now.
They do get violated later in the story. But now we are meandering too much. Now we get to the Ringworld where they crash.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Yeah. So basically they come to they reach the... Sorry, Brennan. This is your
Brennan.
Oh, I mean, it's all good. I'm excited that you guys read it as well. But yeah,
you were just giving us this breakdown, hoping that we didn't, thinking we didn't.
No, it's all good.
No, I finished. Thank you.
Thank you. That warms my heart that you finished the book that I love so much. So they transfer ships from the first ship to what Louis derisively calls the Lying Bastard.
Because its name.
Which are like, okay, we'll call it that, because the puppeteers have not named the ship, christened it, or tested it because they're too afraid, but they know exactly how to design it.
There's one sentence that tells you in there why they're so easily afraid, and that is because puppeteer scientists proved that they have no soul, and so they're afraid of dying because there is no afterlife.
Yep.
They have proved there is no afterlife, and so their whole life is designed to protect themselves from getting hurt so that they don't die.
Yep. I think it is.
There's no afterlife, so there's no point.
It is hilarious that they're thousands of years technologically advanced ahead of us, but Nessus still has the courtesy to go, this is for us. I don't know about if there's an afterlife for you guys, but for our race, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And they're all like, "Oh, okay." But yeah, initially, Speaker gets very flustered that as they're sending all forms of communication, radio, a laser radio, microwave, they're trying to send all forms of communication to the Ringworld. They're not getting anything. So they initially tried to take a survey of this thing. And the Ringworld itself has they sort of see how it has an inner ring that simulates a day-night cycle. They see how it's not just
The shadow squares.
Yes, yeah. There's the daylight squares. There's it's not just like a ring you'd wear in your finger. It's actually contoured so that on one side, if there are hills, valleys, and mountains and so on the opposite side of the ring, those become the depths for the body of water. And it's almost perfectly designed for for a species that enjoys the water as well as the land. And from that alone, they can postulate that there's perhaps a humanoid species. They know that based off of the infrared radiation coming off of the Ringworld, they know that the temperature has to be supportive of life. However, the Ringworld has a sort of automated defense system. And causes the lying bastard to crash land. This is after they specifically say anyone who's trying to directly land in the ring is a fool.
Yeah.
They're like, this is a terrible idea, don't do this. They then proceed to crash land.
Yeah, this is where, like, I really like because it became like a very good old-fashioned adventure tale. You know, like, our ship crashed, what are we going to do? And they proceeded... There is a humanoid species on this planet, and it was kind of a shock because the crew obviously expected them to be like highly advanced because I mean they built essentially like a Dyson sphere, this like thing that is, you know, we only can postulate, we can't even come close to building, and even then they couldn't come close to building in the story, and they built a ring version of it. And yet these people are extremely primitive.
Yeah.
They are incapable of... They still believe that the builders are gods. They're in pursuit of the arc, which is like you can see the curve of the ring.
Yeah.
So they chase it like the end of the rainbow.
Yeah. Or they worship the arch.
Or they worship the arch. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost shockingly primitive for the technological level required to create the ring.
At one point, they come across Louis Wu and his... I read an audiobook, and they pronounced it Louis Wu, so I don't know if it's Louis or Louis, but either or it's all the same. It doesn't make a difference. And all the group decided to go... they had to find... I believe it was they wanted to find the rim. They thought if there's any way to get off this planet...
It's going to be off the sides, yeah.
It's got to be on the rim. And so they started going, not realizing that they've got about 500,000 miles to go. They were lucky enough to land dead smack in the middle of a 1.5 million mile wide, thick rim, which is, it's just, they could not fathom it. And they went, I think, 150,000 miles before they found a floating castle. And in this floating castle... were people underneath worshiping it. It's like that's heaven. They believe the floating castle was visibly heaven. And when he died, he went up there.
Sort of like Zardoz. They worship the floating head with the mouth.
Yeah.
The guys came out, yeah.
That spits out guns if they give it food.
Yeah. Remember, Zardoz takes place in 2023. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's... What was Sean Connery in his best outfit ever? Just the over-the-shoulder ball sack.
One interesting thing that happens over and over throughout this book is they're talking about the concept of luck, and Nessus constantly goes back and forth on whether or not Tila Brown is actually lucky or not, and they don't really find out how in what way is she lucky until the end of the book. But it's constantly like
they believe she's not. They believe that Nessus is wrong. There's no way she could be lucky because
she was the unluckiest.
She was the unluckiest of the lucky because she didn't avoid his phone call, and she was on a ship that crashed.
Yeah, but then she doesn't Like because it's basically like for every like good thing that happens to her on the journey, like something bad will happen.
Yeah.
Usually not affecting her, it'll affect one of the other ones, or like she'll get into a dangerous situation, and by like she like they get stuck into a basically like a hurricane, and then like where she's about to get like sucked off of the Ringworld, and like by virtue of her own luck, she passes out, and basically like her forehead like donks onto like the like emergency like go button on her flight cycle.
That was funny because that was the point where they kind of switched from being like, no, she's unlucky too. Wait a minute. You know how hard it is to accidentally push that button.
Yeah. Well, because she had to like put her finger in like one slot and then like slam her head on the like a certain button in order for it to happen.
Yeah, for those at home, stowed on the ship were essentially jet bikes, and so they use these flight cycles to travel. They're not just on foot.
They basically travel at Mach 1 or something.
Yeah, but
it
still would take what, like 3 months to reach the edge.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, and they keep running into natives, and each one of them is like less advanced than the others.
Yeah. So eventually they find a still floating city and get captured by sort of magnet system, and where they encounter someone who is an original engineer of the Ringworld.
Well,
it's an automated police station. Right?
She's one the engineer as a race, as opposed to engineer as what her actual profession, which is ship's whore.
Super whore. He was like,
great engineer on this call, thank you.
That's right, you whores.
Yeah. She's her actual profession is ship's prostitute.
Yeah, I believe in this time we call it moral support.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
naval courtesan.
Yeah.
What they find out is like they'd have these crews of 30 that were on these things called ram ships, which would accelerate they have ramjets on the ships, which accelerate them to almost the speed of light, but not quite. So they'd go on these 25 year journeys to like other planets where they'd collect resources and stuff like that and bring them back to the Ringworld. And she did this journey like 6 or 7 times. This 20-year cycle. So she's at this point, like, according to her age, she's 200 years old. But
they had an even more effective form of booster spice.
Yeah, but because of how actually it's implied she's much older than that, because she was like, they were like at that point, what, 500,000 miles from the edge of the rim of the ring.
Something
and she had walked that entire way. So it's implied that she's very, very, very old. But basically, like, on their last journey, they found the Ringworld was, like, dead and no one responded. So she's basically the last surviving member of, like, her crew that in this book that we find.
Yeah. It is funny. She does not trust Speaker to Animals in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Speaker to Animals it scares her.
Mm-hmm.
And his diet particularly scares her as well. So, but they do feed him scavenged.
I mean, he's an 8 foot tall tiger man that like eats raw.
Got all the hair burned off. Remember?
Yeah.
He was stark naked at this point in time.
Yeah.
Because he had gotten in the storm, he had gotten all the hair burnt off of him.
Yeah.
And at this point, Tila Brown, there is a lot of infighting in this group. They were not well put together.
They picked her so much.
Through this, their time being stuck together and them telling stories, that Nessus, the puppeteer, had essentially fucked with the genetics of everybody's species, and like not like
not like his race. Him specifically.
Spearheaded projects to fuck with him. And so, Speaker with Animals was like, you come within 5 feet of me, I will use my claws and kill you. He's very clear in saying, I want to use my claws to disembowel you. And
Nessus like fucks off.
And Louis Wu didn't seem to give a shit. He was like, lucky, not lucky, who gives a shit? But Tila Brown, on the other hand, was livid because she was supposed to be an experiment of psychic luck, which was the thing that Nessus was trying to get. Yeah. So Nessus fucks off after a while. Nessus is like, he runs off and hides because that's what he does. That's his thing is he hides. And
but
Tila
stays
Brown
in contact with Louis.
Tila Brown, after the storm, ran off. She left because she and so in the Citadel with the worst named character in the series, which is Haliloprillar,
yep,
who is the engineer, morale officer.
Long name.
Yeah, they call her Prill.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God.
Tila Brown is not present.
Mm-hmm.
So, which makes Prill seem to be a little bit more comfortable because she was not that comfortable when Tila came back into the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it Louis and Speaker that are initially imprisoned in this automated police station that is this floating structure?
And it's stuck there for like 3 days, hanging upside down.
Yep.
So how are you doing? Yeah, it's just very. Wait.
I just feel bad for Speaker throughout this entire book because at every turn he's getting his ass fucking kicked. You know, he gets horribly burnt. He gets then they have these at the beginning. They have these translator discs which get like overloaded by some automated system on the Ringworld, and like it gets like fuses. It heats up and fuses to his hand. Again, he gets the shit burned out of him by his fly cycle when they get captured, and then he gets stuck hanging upside down for 3 days and goes unconscious for like 2 of them.
Yep. Yeah, it was a rough journey for them.
Yeah.
And in the process they realize that they come to learn that the Ringworld was designed had a couple systems that it was very, very dependent on.
Mm-hmm.
And that was they had a transmogrifying system that would take organic material and turn it into necessary things like metals and things like that, because all they could do was grow very small things.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe the soil was only 40 feet deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they could only grow so much, and then they would take it to the transmogrifier, switch it into something they need, and then bring it out. And that shit failed like immediately. It sounds like the minute they turned it on, it sparked out, burned out, and they were like, well, fuck.
So basically what they found out is that the civilization collapsed because during their travels and like because they had gotten rid of all like because of like what they do, they basically there's a fungus that during one of these journeys they send expeditions they sent out. It mutated to the point where it like eats superconductors, which is like what all of their technology runs off of.
Yeah. So the whole Ringworld is run off of it, and the fungus is like eating away at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now everything is kept on the Ringworld pretty much exclusively just by its sheer mass and the gravity of the Ringworld. Like that's it. And near the end of the book, you come to realize Tila Brown returns with a character who sounds a
Conan
lot
the
like
Barbarian.
Yeah, like if Conan the Barbarian and
or
Indiana Jones,
John Carpenter.
I thought he was like He-Man because he was like blonde and ripped with a sword. So, but like essentially, like this very manly, like powerful. He's chasing the Arch is what he's done. He's called himself Seeker. And that's when the whole story kind of falls into place as to why Tila Brown was on there. Is not only is Tila Brown lucky, she may be the luckiest person in human history.
Mm-hmm.
Because this entire thing was to bring her to find this dude. And that was it. And you come to find out that there's a mountain that was not in the original design called the Fist of God. And that was because a meteorite had hit the Ringworld and caused a 1,000-mile dent in the Ringworld. to where it was the Ringworld hull was stretched just a few feet, which it was massive. It was super thick, which obviously would be to build a 93 million mile diameter thing. And that mountain messed with the air current, so they actually landed on a very tiny part of the habitable Ringworld, and everything else was completely wrecked. Now, I could be wrong. That's how I understood it, was the spot between the two mountains was the only place that had appropriate air current to where stuff was still livable.
Yeah. So to expand on that, there was not an artificial gravity system for the Ringworld. What ends up happening is it had
centrifugal force.
Centripetal force of its spinning was enough that there were raised walls on either side of the rim of the ring, and the speed of that. If you imagine a water wheel, or if you imagine creating this out of wood and plexi in your garage, and you pour water in it, and you spin it at a high enough speed, and you turn it upside down, the centripetal force will press the water against the sides to such an extent that it wouldn't fall out if you were to flip it upside down, if you really had it going fast enough. So what ends up happening is that's supposed to trap in the vast majority of the breathable air, and every 1,000 or so years they might have to add, more breathable oxygen into the mix. But essentially that was what was keeping the air. And so now that this mountain deformation goes past the height of the Ringworld rim, it just, all of that air escaped from the Ringworld other than what was trapped between the deformations. And so they were very lucky to have landed on the hospitable area.
It's funny, it's not big. Like, for the scope of the whole thing, I think it's not even 1 million miles of the entire circumference of the ring, of the 584 million mile circumference. I think it's like maybe just a hair over 1 million miles. It's still a massive spot of land, but like it was for the scope of it, it was a very finite point that they had to hit.
Yeah.
So, and all of these things falling, they had to find one of the shadow squares, the things that create the day-night cycle.
Yeah.
That was trailing a wire, and because of that, they had to find that wire, and that wire would lead towards Seeker. But all these things came into play that that were very, very infinitesimal of likelihood of happening, which is when they came to a kind of like existential paradox of like, what are we going to do when humanity with humanity now, all these people who are subconsciously like altering reality with their desires.
Yeah.
And I was like, to me, I was laughing because you know what I first thought when I'm like, they're creating a race of people that can alter reality without knowing. Like, they made orcs.
Yeah.
Puppeteers made 40k orcs.
Yeah. So it's fundamentally psyker energy. Right? Yeah. Remember, we've talked about this before, how 40k is like the ancient Rome. If you think of IPs as civilizations, they take everything from sci-fi, that the strengths of certain sci-fi, and just put it together in this massive amalgam that just works. They take the AI bands of Dune. They take the Adeptus Mechanicus is just the Foundation from Foundation. And
Sheila Brown is the orcs.
Yeah. The idea of thought made real is the Immaterium, the warp in 40k. It's psyker energy. It's the orcs have some of the most powerful sources of psyker energy in that storyline. So yeah, the whole Tila Brown thing. You can think of it two ways: either like desire made manifest, or mainlining a call straight to the divine. Now
it was typically. No offense, Brendan. Typically, you like a lot of really hard sci-fi that me, as a high fantasy fan, am kind of like, there's a lot of dork in this, but this one was fantastic. And at the end of it,
there's just enough like of that sort of like fantastic journey sort of scenario.
Well, to me, it's more sci-fi is. For high fantasy, you can do whatever the hell you want. Like you just be like, why? Because magic. Shut up.
Magic.
And that's it. Like it's done. So the story can go anywhere. There's a little bit more rules with sci-fi, and a lot of sci-fi falls into making up a lot of weird ass words that just are confusing as shit. And you're like, what is happening? Like, when you get all these made up words, this one really didn't. This one was very, very well done. Everything was easy to understand. Everything was very clear, and everything had a feel of plausibility in it.
I think that's what's nice about this one is like in terms of like
those aliens, but
like again, we talked about how with Foundation, like Isaac Asimov is kind of like one of the founding, sci-fi authors. Larry Niven is one of the others. So it's like we mentioned how Ringworld is sort of a thing. It spawned all kinds of different sci-fis. Like it inspired Halo with the Halos, and a few different things that sci-fis. And I think the reason is like it's a very accessible sort of sci-fi. Like you don't have to have a whole bunch of like you don't need to be an astrophysicist to like admire the journey.
Or constantly flip back to a glossary to wonder what a nipple tech is or something like that. You're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
And it almost yeah, go ahead.
And actually, surprisingly for this one, in terms of like when this sci-fi book came about, a lot of like the time where this book was written, in terms of like gender stuff, is like no bueno. But this one is like Larry. Like we talked about that. There's that other sci-fi book we did where it was like a very like misogynistic view of women, but like this one it was very like Louis Wu, the main character, doesn't give a fuck about gender. Like he doesn't care about like Tila Brown, like from like the woman perspective of her coming on the journey. It's like no, I don't want you to go. It's because you're like 20. I'm 200. If I die, it's whatever. But like you're 20, you're 22 years old. Like
it didn't even started. It didn't even start it, and that is true. This one did seem to have kind of like an egalitarian type mentality. Like everybody's the same, other than like obviously there's the technological superiority, of the puppeteers, which he did balance well with he did balance their stronger traits. So like the puppeteers being so afraid of any kind of harm makes them
uber backstabby.
Like, but they have the ability to literally create a cluster of planets. Like, where's your homeworld? It's home worlds, and we just kind of like glue planets together and then just fly them around so nobody will find us and hurt us. Yeah. And you're like, you've got that kind of power, but you are terrified of any injury. Yeah. Like, and then you've got the Kazin on the other hand, especially Speaker to Animals, who's so upset that he has to be a diplomat that he's ready to punch literally anything to prove that he's tough. And that got him into trouble several times, where every time he's something there, he's like, I will go out and hit it. And you're like, why?
We are now in wartime measures. I am in command of this mission now. And everyone's it's like, dude, that was like, those were automated defenses. I guess that is possible.
You're like, just give it to him.
Yeah, just let him have his fun. Yeah. Like he's constantly like, put me in charge, and everyone's like, we're not fighting right now. How are we in a war situation?
It was. I mean, I don't know how many of you are Star Trek fans, but like, it reminded you the Kazin feel a lot
Worf.
like
It's
Klingon.
Worf.
Yeah,
it's Worf.
Where they're like, I must do battle, and you're like, well, that's a sign spinner. Like he's just telling you 20% off lattes. You don't have to go. He's brandishing a weapon. No, he's not.
One of the other funny moments with the whole Kazin human thing was Louis Wu it's like, oh shit, he's not gonna listen to me unless I like challenge him. So Louis like challenges Speaker, and it's basically this very like verbose like, I challenge you and for my honor, blah blah blah, and then like the situation gets diffused because they're like, we're sorry, like the Kazin are like, you don't have to like actually challenge him. That's just like, he's young and he's posturing. And then also, at the end of it, at the end of it, Speaker to Animals is like, I found your challenge too verbose. In Kazuchi culture, it is usually much better to preclude your challenge with a roar and pounce.
Yeah. He's like, what are you doing saying you're challenging me? Why aren't you attacking me? It was just...
Yeah.
It's so good because you're like, huh.
I also liked, he did a pretty decent job of creating, for this first book, some good depth to the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And you did definitely take a journey in all of, like, Louis was pretty fleshed out at the beginning. He's like, I'm an old grizzly man who still looks like he's, like, what, mid-30s?
Yeah.
So
it's assumed that he looks like he's like 20-something.
Yeah, he's just keeping himself busy because he's old as shit and doesn't care anymore.
Yeah.
But the journey you took with Nessus, of Nessus being this, like, in the beginning they talk about his, unnecessarily sultry voice and his, like, demeanor of being this, like, smarter than more noble creature. By the end, he's like a shadow. Like, he's like some kind of, like, sinister voice in the shadows. Like, he's like, and I've guided your family for centuries. You're like, what the fuck happened to this? Like, just, like, the puppeteers, you start out like, oh, they're so advanced. At the end, you're like, they are dicks.
Yeah.
They are literally, they are assholes. And
they're basically like, they're like cowards to the point of, like, they will screw, like, they're so scared of, like, any sort of threat that they have no qualms whatsoever about manipulating everyone around them.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just so funny. And then, like, every time they're like, and this shit happened, and Nessus is like, right here, I did it. And you're like, fuck you.
It's just, it's almost, it's me. I picked a hard sci-fi book. It won the Hugo in 1971.
I'm a sci-fi person, right? Like, I'm not, like, it's not my jam. But I really liked it. Like, full disclosure, I got about 65-70% through.
You have a baby, it's fine.
It's almost like you have a biological imperative that keeps you busier than the rest of us.
We're calling the field stands.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it. It was a little bit dense in the beginning to kind of get into it, and it took me.
There was a lot to explain. There was a lot to explain.
And what took me the longest was, but now, you're kind of flying through. It's moving. It's fun. It's like you have these different, species in these worlds, and it feels, I don't know. It felt accessible for someone who doesn't actually enjoy a lot of sci-fi.
Yeah.
And
it was very good. I have to give it to you too, Brendan. This was a good pick because I had a great time with it. So it was a lot of fun to read.
That makes me warm and fuzzy. What the big thing to remember is I read this book. I started reading this book in high school before I knew about the full band of electromagnetic radiation. Before I knew about astrophysics and O'Neill cylinders and Dyson spheres. I just read it. And the strength, it is a hard sci-fi book. It won the Hugo. The strength of this book is the characters. You're stuck with four flawed beings that don't get along, that have to work out their problems. When Tila decides to stay on the Ringworld, it's like Louise, like, oh man, she found like this Fabio front of the paperback romance novel guy, and like she's staying. And Nessus for
you felt it too, like you felt that.
You felt Louis like, oh,
and for Nessus, but
he still lets her go,
She tells him at the beginning of the book, "I love you," and he's like, "Yeah, I love you too." He's like rolling over, like pillow talk, and by the end of the book, he's like, "Oh damn, Nessus is a sociopath," and his own people, the puppeteers, deem Nessus insane. Because
everybody that wants to leave the homeworld is insane.
Because
their leaders are called those who lead from behind.
Yeah.
Yes, that is their highest term. Is those?
I am the hindmost of this mission.
It's like that's the highest term. So
Nessus, Speaker, I still have the task. Like every time Speaker gets uppity.
I got the Orgo beam.
Yeah.
But
The Orgasmerator, don't forget.
the Orgasmerator. But the thing about Nessus is his courage is like the beginning of a manic episode. And so what follows is his crushing despair. And for being a sociopath, for having directly fiddled, directly having engineered the human Zinti Wars, for genetically engineering Tilo's existence, for these levels of just obscenity of interfering with lives of others, he's also sitting there having panic attacks and be like, I'm afraid. Can I have cold carrot juice? And you're like,
where he like
what?
curls up and literally like if he gets
into
freaked
a
out,
ball.
he'll curl up into a ball.
Is his defense mechanism is he's a solid torso with like these 3 spindly legs, these tall, long like necks, and their defense mechanism for these incredibly technologically advanced creatures is they roll into a tight little ball. And anything that's remotely threatening isn't. So it's just like every time Speaker to Animals is like, I'm going to kill you, Nessus balls up. Like any kind of threat.
It was
Nessus
hilarious is like at the end of the book is when Louis is like tired of this shit and just like grabs Speaker by one of the legs and drags him over and he's like, do not do this right now. Get out.
I can't deal with this.
But still at the end of it, like, did you not get a pang when Nessus gets injured?
Yeah.
Nessus gets injured and one of his heads gets cut off, and that's when you're like, oh, thank God, his stomach is where his brain is. But a little part of you was like, oh, like he's dead for real, and like everybody's going on like these panic moments, and they're trying to survive, and like Nessus gets one of his heads cut off, and you're like, oh shit, like he's dead. I felt that, like I felt like it was a poignant thing because like even though he's a bastard, like
he still did come back and help them, even though like he could have just fucked off.
Yeah.
I don't think he really like. The funny thing is like Larry Niven did such an excellent job at explaining at keeping these creatures so true to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they're trying to explain, hey, you pissed off Speaker to Animals, you pissed off Tila Brown because you messed with it. He's like, why? I needed us to be safe. So, like, it didn't really connect that, domesticating these warrior races and, like, making human psychic reality-altering monsters. He's like, yeah, but it'll keep me from dying.
So like, they have these, like, he's got these, like, 2 head hands.
With one eye.
It's just like whatever, like his gesture of like confusion or like shock.
What the hell?
It's like both heads look at each other.
He's like, what?
What? Come again?
I know it's not fair, but I pictured the guy from from Pan's Labyrinth with the hands that have the eyes on it.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just crazy that in a hard sci-fi competition for a Hugo, in a hard sci-fi genre,
in the 70s,
this is 1970. So this is
the height of science fiction.
Yeah. 52 years ago, you have a protagonist with an Asiatic background. You have a female protagonist. You have aliens of warring cultures. All of them have to figure out how to get along. They all speak frankly about overpopulation on their planets. They're stuck in their ship. They're stuck in their Ringworld. These people have to converse with each other and get along. They speak frankly about sexuality. And Nessus gets embarrassed and is like, I find offense to this.
Knowing multiple languages is a matter of course. It's like
yeah. It's geopolitical tolerance and it's the steps towards utopia. It has a very progressive feel to it. They do use some terms that I won't mention that we prefer not to use nowadays to refer to genetic background, but it's like from 1970. This book is shockingly progressive. Like
the usage of that was like more to give like a
scientific
a impression of appearance or whatever, as opposed to like using it as a pejorative term.
Exactly. Yeah.
I also in favor of what you were saying. I look at the peak time for like high sci-fi is probably like 1950 to 75, give or take. Like, and then, but that's
Heinlein,
also the time you got the weirdest language, and like you'd have to work so hard to remember what was going on. And some of the people that would just throw whatever concept they have into the wind. And like, I'm a big fan of the old radio broadcasts, and so I love the sci-fi, like Dimension X and X-1 and all the stuff made in like 1940 to 1960. And like everything is rocket, everything is atomic, everything is has some kind of TOR at the end of it, and like it's they didn't have any of this. Like this seemed like there was research and it was plausible, and it didn't have any of that like kind of like hokey sci-fi aspect where it's just kind of like hand wave. Like fantasy does with magic, like hand wave, go science, and then they just do.
Except the whole thing where they're like ships, they could just like turn it invisible at will, so you could just like see outside from every angle. But
yeah, like that. But with sensors, you can do that. I put on a headset, and I can suddenly be in the mines of Moria, like I did that yesterday while I was getting frustrated in Demio with Ben. Like,
it's just
rampaged your city.
Yeah, then a baby rampaged my city, which was kind of strange and yet awesome at the same time.
It's a shockingly rare mix of characters that are written so believably and so organically different. It's very hard, as someone who toys with writing, it's very hard to make characters seem distinct. They're all coming from the same author. They're so unique to each other. The narrative is so once they like hit the Ringworld, it's so concisely written.
By the way, 4 hours into the 11-hour book, by the way.
They don't land on Ringworld until about a little more than a third into the totality of the audiobook. And even then, you're so busy learning about the complexities of Nessus and of the puppeteers and of the Zinti. There's just this depth of plausible history, realistic characters, organic characters. I hesitate to use the term human because they're not all human, but they just seem so human and so organic. Yeah. And yet at the same time, there's a vigorous attempt to adhere to scientific truth, and it's just a knockout hit. It just all seemed to roll for me. Yeah, go ahead.
I remember, again, throwing it back to Star Trek. That's where I first heard of the Dyson sphere, and I love that concept forever. Like the idea of encasing the sun in a massive ball, and infinite power for the rest of forever. I thought that was the neatest thing. And so, as they were explaining the concept of the Ringworld, they were explaining, and what it's going to be. You get some idea with Ringworld, you're going to be when he's it's a ring around the sun, you're I could see that coming. But the explanation made me super happy.
Yeah.
Because it ties into so many other things and so many other points that sci-fi brings in. Hyper advanced race, what is it? They built a Dyson sphere,
Yeah.
And I remember, I've always loved it. The fact that the Ringworld was a modified Dyson sphere. Are you going to screw the rest of the solar system out of light? No. We'll we're not going to be that big of a dicks. We're going to do a Dyson Halo,
It's also there's a TNG episode where they found a Dyson sphere and it was another dead civilization, but all of the automated systems are still running. So
I just watched. This is how I knew to put the ring on her. Colleen last night is hey, let's watch the Star Trek movies, and I'm like, what?
Are you coming on to me?
What? Yeah, no, sure. And so I'm just
You've been married for a while. Your training is finally.
Which one? Was it the second one with Benedict Cumberbatch and he's in the shower? Because that's just a third.
No.
Wrath of Khan. My hand's shaking as I'm turning on Wrath of Khan.
That's classic Star Trek, dude.
We're sitting there.
You have to be a fan to want to watch Wrath of Khan.
Who's Khan?
Nobody picks that one out of them. Ricardo
Montalban.
But we have to be careful of talking about Star Trek because we can distract ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. But my parallel here, I will cut it there. But my parallel here is this is gateway hard sci-fi. This is accessible. It's before, in my nascent brain, before getting an engineering degree and just like, ooh, space is cool, I was able to follow this book because of the strength of the characters. For people who wouldn't normally read sci-fi, I recommend this book. It may be a little dry for you at the beginning as they're explaining, getting ready for the journey, but it's so I mean, let's put it this way. I bring up Star Trek because this series was so popular that Larry Niven wrote a Zinti character for Star Trek the Animated Series, who appears as the crew on the Enterprise. And then the Zinti race are in the Starfleet Battles tabletop game, where you can have like starship battles. The Zinti are integrated into the Star Trek storyline.
What are the puppeteers?
The puppeteers are not. The puppeteers are not. They be.
That's the only thing that felt a little ridiculous was the puppeteers. And I mean, like,
just from a biology standpoint, though.
Yeah, that's it. By a biology standpoint, that they're essentially two-headed horses with like long with like Cthulhu beards. You're
like a brain torso, 3 like tripod legs, and like two arm heads.
There's no way, biologically speaking, these things would have survived anywhere.
Yeah.
If there's any predator, even if the predator's like a Yorkie, that would get killed. They are the weakest things I've ever seen.
Especially since there's a couple times where like Nessus is running and like gets tangled up in his own legs.
Yeah, there's
the 3-legged animal is the most stable in the world.
There's only for standing.
Yeah,
there's a threat. Funny. There's a threat speaker has for him. He's like, "Say that again, and I'll tie your heads together."
Yeah,
they're not scary. They look like sock puppets that are afraid to do anything to vegetables.
With the little tentacles just sticking out of their mouth, and like you imagine it, like no matter how ferocious your dog is or big your dog is, you give it anything in its mouth and let it go trotting around with it. You're like, oh, that's adorable. It doesn't matter what it is. And now you've got a race where that's the only way they can handle stuff is by walking around with it in their mouths. Mm-hmm. Like, that was the only thing that I thought was like a little silly, but again, it fit and you kind of loved it.
Tila says that puppeteers and Zinti are cute.
Yeah.
And then Speaker's like, never say that again.
Never say that again. It's like the Casablanca of sci-fi. The characters are so permanently memorable.
Yeah, they were.
For its genre, it's just
of it. You can watch a series of Ringworld too. I know there's some some film adaptations. So I don't know if it's a movie or if it's a series, but I would watch it. Like, it was very fun.
Yeah, and again, the mark that this book left on sci-fi, it
was very good.
It integrates with Star Trek in some avenues. It leads to the invention of the Kilrathi for the entire Wing Commander computer game franchise. Wing Commander 3 starred Mark Hamill as the protagonist. It had John Rhys Davies in it. It had Malcolm McDowell in it. You had huge crossover and influence from Larry Niven's work on all sorts of things. MIT, a bunch of MIT students went to a con to chant the Ringworld is unstable, because in his initial print of the book, he doesn't explain anything that maintains an orbit around the sun for the Ringworld. So in the Ringworld Engineers, in the second book,
he says there
are thrusters on it to keep it aligned.
Yeah.
So there's this the fandom for this series still persists to this day.
So what you're saying is the series was expounded by just people bitching.
Yes.
so
by nerds complaining, he's like, fine, I'll write another book. That'll show you nerds.
As a huge Babylon 5 fan, and that show was one of the first shows where Michael Straczynski would listen to fan responses online, on email, and on really early IRC chat and stuff, and would manipulate the script of the show based off fan feedback. And as a DM, I shape my campaigns off of really interesting things the players come up with. Or if they call me out on something like, oh, it's a blacksmith, huh? What's his name? I'm like, so like if I get challenged by my players, it produces better work. If J. Michael Straczynski got pushed by his fans to make a better Babylon 5, it resulted in a better Babylon 5. I really feel like the Ringworld series is only improved by the love its fans have for like, hey, the Ringworld is unstable. It just results in a more memorable body of work, and I'm really glad you guys enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Me too. Like
Yeah.
the fans sometimes can like are
Ruin.
like it, and you're like, I cannot get into this because you guys suck.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
In this case, it's like they're like, we know how you can make it better.
Science, hard science.
Science.
Larry Niven is still around,
Mhm.
Yes,
and
he
he is
is.
still writing.
Yep.
Yeah, I just looked. He got the coolest award sound in 2015. The Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America named him in 2015 the recipient of the Damon Knight Memorial Grandmaster Award. That is the best nerd award I've ever heard.
Damn.
Yeah.
Hope it was a sword.
Ben, you now have a goal.
Well,
I hope it was a trophy sword. But anyways,
we're coming up on time here. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on Ringworld they would like to share? Sorry, Missy. I feel like we kind of talked over you a lot of this episode, but
That's okay. Because I didn't finish it. I could only interject where I could.
But
alrighty.
I will give it for sci-fi.
She admitted that she enjoyed it, so
yeah. I won't spoil the ending for those of you that are interested in reading it. However, I think the way they escape Ringworld is pretty ingenious.
Mhm.
I thought that was clever as well. But yeah.
Yeah, very, very good.
Yeah. It's actually a really good series to like continue on too. Like it gets like if you thought this first one was wild, like it gets crazier after this. So they go back and shit gets even crazier.
So
Because
fun.
they don't have Tila.
That's true. It's like, oh shit, we don't have a walking luck box.
No, Louis, I believe, goes back to save Tila. Or he gets like called back by Tila for something, I think.
Like it turns out he's a jackass. Well,
Yeah.
he doesn't wear a shirt and carries a sword around, and he calls himself Seeker. What do you expect?
He's not
There's-
very.
He's
There's-
dumb as a box of hammers. Like,
there's-
Himbo energy coming
Yeah.
off the sneaker.
Basically, you do basically find out that basically humanity originated from the Ringworld, but that's a whole other thing. So we'll leave it at that.
That's really depressing.
So with that, it's my pick this time. I've got two options.
Oh, good. You're being democratic. I just got done explaining this isn't a democracy. Because everybody just tells him what they're going to read. And he's like, Missy does. I'm like, she's nicer than we are.
I tried to. I couldn't think of like a fantasy thing that I wanted to cover, but the one that I was.
I wrote this novella called Joel Sucks.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think we should read that.
yeah. I thought about that one, but I don't think our readers would like it. Our listeners.
Like, I've written it too.
There's too much like erotic. Like
Yeah,
I
there's too much homoeroticism going on. Yeah.
It's like a yaoi with no pictures.
This is the last time you'll see me on Nerd and Legend.
I resigned my position.
I've been owned too hard. So I've got one option, which is The Forever War by. Hold on one second, I forgot the author's name.
There's an animated, or there's a graphic novel.
There's a graphic novel. There's The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, which is uses the science fiction setting to sort of as an allegory for what soldiers went through coming back from the Vietnam War, which is I've read it a couple times now and it's pretty solid. Or we do Gaz Kolthraka, Prophet of the Wa.
Did you see how he like his face when he said it? He was like slogging through the other one. He's like, "We could do the Forever War, or Gaskell Thraka." Like you look like just an electrode to your butt.
I just love the book so much, and you guys hate on it, but I kind of want to get Missy's take on it.
Nobody hates on it.
I don't hate on it. I don't hate on
Nobody
it.
hates on it. It's just,
I got orcs in my basement, boy.
Nobody hates on it. It's just that's kicking Missy into a world she's gonna be.
he hates it.
She loves it.
He says.
She just said, "Wow."
Does she play Tau? Is that it?
Yeah, he's probably a Tau player.
Nids, maybe. Yeah. Well,
So I'll leave it up to you guys. We've got those two options.
yeah.
Oh, fine, just do it. I'll
Just do it. Or you're not gonna give up on the nerds. We initially said that our book talks would end with Gaskell Thraka, but
I'm trying to get book talks, you dick. I like these.
no, I'm just saying. Like, I just want to make sure that she's not gonna leave after this.
You know what? If we give you the next book, that will be
you get the next book.
That will be penance paid for.
This is the next book.
Well, I'm saying you will get the next. If we do Gaz, you will get the next pick
as penance,
and you can
Need penance. I'll do it.
and you can make it, and you can be as brutal with me as I am being with you by picking this novel. Fair?
Yeah, it's fine. Maybe I like it. You don't know.
Yeah, maybe you'll love it. And Missy comes back in 2 weeks and is like, I'm buying orcs now.
She sits down, she's like, all right, boys, let's talk about this book. You're like, oh, fuck.
Everyone has to get into it now because Henry Cavill is doing it.
Is that what it
Yeah.
is? That's right.
It's like the in thing now.
He's the internet's boyfriend.
Yeah.
How about Keanu Reeves? When did the internet break up with him?
Well, but
Boyfriend.
Oh, the internet's a slut. That's
but Keanu's just Keanu, but Henry is the nerds, he's like, see, we could be muscly too.
we are not. Just to be clear, nobody on Nerds of Legend is, because we are.
No, Brennan is.
Henry Cavill is weaponized nerddom. He's like
is.
This is Hollywood man.
Did for D&D.
This is Hollywood man that I'm going to turn into fandom. He's taking the ideal and he's going, I'm going to do shows on books I like and franchises that got me made fun of in school.
Yeah.
So he is psyker energy. He is will made manifest. I think that's why he is such a following.
I bet if we dig into Henry Cavill's past, he's a fat nerd in high school.
Oh no, dude! Henry Cavill was called Fat Cavill in school. He was taunted in school. He played.
That's what he was all busy doing.
He played 40K as a kid. He was made fun of in school, and look at what he's doing now. That is why he has such a following, because he's us. He's just us, and he made it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Henry Cavill's a year younger than I am, so I'm just saying, probably not.
Joel, you're a hunk. Come on.
Probably not.
This beer gut is the fuel tank for a sex machine.
There it is.
Tell yourself that's terrible.
Ben rides on diesel.
Point two. As Nerds of Legends, as we've all discovered, love stories. Mm-hmm. We're going to start a several-part series discussing Celtic folklore. So next week will be a broad overview of kind of the pantheon and some basics of their religions until we start breaking everything down into some more notable characters and things. Mm-hmm. We're going to do that for the next couple weeks. Of course, alternating for the book talks, but we're very excited to kind of get into the lore of a lot of these legends. So much, feel free to join us.
How much Irish do you guys have up here?
How much? I feel like you're about to flex and be like, I'm 71% Irish. Shut up.
No, I'm not. I'm a half. I'm half. But so that means
I'm about a half.
Yeah, I have to read.
My family comes from all over the UK. No Irish.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay. Well, my
beloved
look at this beard. This is not the Irish.
Water, and
no, I only have 5%.
That's because you pillaged your ass into all of that area. That's what it was.
Yes, I am a Viking, and I conquered the rest of you.
Yeah, genetically. Her people are the Vikings from Scandinavia, and actually, they have come down and deposited fairly liberally DNA all over the UK and Ireland.
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, do not forget, England is a massive melting pot of genealogy. So my blood will curse me if I don't contribute to that talk. So I'm obligatory to attend.
Okay, so just to recap all of that little discussion, next week we're going to be doing an overview of the Celtic pantheon of folklore, and then
some Celtic myths, and then getting deeper into the pantheon after.
Yes. And then the following week, we will be covering the book Gazkul Thraka, Prophet of the War by Nate Crowley.
Promise me that you will not
spell it.
Can you?
Wow, it's W and a lot of A's.
Can you promise me that you will not do the entire episode in the orc voice?
I will not do the entire episode.
Now listen up, cheesecake.
In the orc voice.
Top of your earrings to listen to my book story. Yeah, I'll stop.
Yeah, that was rough.
That was yeah.
I'm typing it into the chat.
No, I'm just gonna send it to her. I have it.
Oh.
We'll get all orky voice out at the beginning, and we'll stick to normalcy. Yeah.
Again, I will not do the entire episode in orc voice.
It's $16 on the Kindle.
No, that's why you audiobook it.
Yeah.
I don't know why you would not.
Yeah.
That Grandma Wendy wants her money. Yeah. I mean, you got to pay to GW. That's how it is.
Not that long ago, it was like 40. So,
yeah, I bought 4 of the books for the Horus Heresy, the first 4 books of the Horus Heresy, and it was like $20 a piece.
Yeah.
And they're like old ass books too.
Yeah. So, and then our final little reminder is that we will be continuing our adventures through the mysteries of Candlekeep on Wednesday, starting at 4:30, and we will be continue to do that for a while. So that's our last little announcement for the night. I think that's coming up on time. So thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you again tomorrow for some D&D action. All right. Thanks everybody. Good night.